Hello and welcome to another episode of Christine's Creativity Cabinet, where we have the time to be creative. Today I'm going to show you a dupe that I made of a Target chalkboard clock that I thought looked really cool. I did it with mainly Dollar Tree materials. This is what the Target clock looks like. And this is my clock. I made it from a couple of Dollar Tree ornament signs, amazingly enough. And I think it turned out pretty cool. So, as usual, let's get to making art. I started by prying off the metal ornament hangers from the ornaments. The first one came off really easy with just my little screwdriver. The second one I had a little bit more of a trouble with. I had to ended up using my scissors to pull it off. And because I wanted to paint the back, I also sanded off all the glitter on one of the ornaments. Then I took each ornament and I used it as a kind of way to trace around to make a curved line underneath where the ornament hanger was, because I was going to cut the ornament hanger off. I didn't want it to be cut off straight, but I wanted it to be cut off as a curve. So here you see me doing that. I first cut it with my craft knife, and then I finished the cutting with my heavy-duty Betty Crocker scissors. And so what I finally ended up with was just two circles. I used my little sanding block to sand where I cut so that it would be nice and smooth. Then I used a black marker and my ruler, and I made several lines in the middle so that way I could figure out which line was actually really the center. And then I figured out where the center of the circle was. I started with my little mini Phillips screwdriver, just twisting and twisting and twisting it in the middle there to make a hole. And then, eventually, once it was big enough to stick some scissors in there, I stuck scissors in there to make the hole bigger. Here's my clock mechanism, and I wanted to basically make the hole big enough so that that clock mechanism would fit through the hole. Once I got a hole that was big enough for that, then I used my sanding block just to sand off the parts on the inside and outside of the hole that kind of would stick out. Then I took my other circle, and I used the first circle to trace where the hole was. Then I drew a line above and below the hole, because the shiplap boards are going to end there, so that way the hole would still be in the center there. Now you see me just marking out about inch-wide strips onto there, and then I'm going to take my craft knife and cut them. So I'm cutting the second circle into boards, so that I have ultimately a shiplap effect. So here I am scoring them really well with a craft knife. And eventually I'm going to take my scissors and try to cut. And eventually I'm going to be able to just kind of break them off. So here I am going with the scissors. It's a little bit difficult because that chipboard is actually very thick. And some of them I was able to cut. Some of them I would basically cut the a little bit in from the edges, and then I would be able to just snap it off. Some of the edges turned out to be a little rough, but I was able to kind of fix that with my little sanding block. Since this is meant to be farmhouse, it doesn't really matter all that much if there's a little bit of roughness here and there. That just increases the distress look. That very small, little skinny part in the center broke, but that doesn't matter because I wasn't going to use that on the finished clock. That's just the space that's left over on there to make sure that the hole is still there on the finished product to be able to put the clock mechanism through. This was a little bit challenging, but it was doable, and I eventually got all of my boards cut and sanded, and these are going to be glued to the other circle, and that way my clock will have a shiplap effect. The next step was to take my backing board and paint it black with Waverly chalk paint from Walmart in the color of ink. I painted it all over, and once I was done with that, then I also painted the strips that I cut out completely black. I painted them just in the front, but I also painted the edges because you can kind of see the edges, and so I wanted to make sure that it all looked black. Then I took the hands from my clock mechanism and I painted all three of them white with white Waverly chalk paint from Walmart. Once the paint on my backing board and on the strips was dry, then I arranged them onto the backing board to make sure that they all fit properly. Then I started gluing them down with my clear Gorilla Glue. I noticed that some of them had not been adequately painted along the edges, so I took my big chunky permanent Sharpie, fake Sharpie from Dollar Tree, and I used that to touch things up. And now here you see me gluing all the strips down with my Gorilla Glue. Now it was time to put the numbers on the clock face. I was going to do this with some stencils that I had gotten from the Dollar Tree. They had some nice stick-on stencils that I thought would work just great. The problem was, though, I didn't realize this until I'd opened them up and looked at them, that these were positive stencils rather than negative stencils, if you know what I mean. And so I realized that those wouldn't really work because I wanted my numbers to be white. I didn't want to have white around black numbers. So I decided to abandon the stencils and instead go for some hand lettering. So I took my chalk pencil and I first put the numbers 12, 6, 3, and 9 where they should be, and that helped me to figure out where the other numbers should be. I used chalk pencil because that allowed me to erase if I needed to. And like the inspiration piece, some of the numbers went over the edges of the boards, and that did that on the inspiration piece, so I did that on my piece as well. Here you see me going in with a baby wipe and erasing some of the numbers and replacing them because I felt like their placement wasn't quite right, wasn't quite the way I wanted them to be. But once I had everything the way I wanted it to be, then I took my white paint marker that I'd also gotten from the Dollar Tree and I went over all the numbers with it so that they were all nice and bright white. Then I decided I wanted to write Chalkboard Clock Company at the bottom to make it look more kind of industrial. And after I did that, I also took my chalk pencil and marked in little lines along the edge. These are the lines that mark the minutes on the clock face. You'll notice that when I was writing in Chalkboard Clock Company that I use my little trick of starting with the letter that's most in the middle and then building in and out from that letter, and that way that phrase ended up being centered. Once I had everything down, and then again I went in with my white paint marker and went over all the lines that I did with a chalk pencil to make them permanent. Once my clock face was done, it was time to attach the clock mechanism so that it would actually be a clock. This was just a matter of removing several little nuts and washers from the little thing that sticks out, and then sticking that through the hole and then reapplying them. And in the last step, taking the hands that I had painted and applying them, and then taking the final little washer and putting it over the top. And then it was just a matter of finding a AA battery to put in there so that the clock would work. Now, when I got to this point, I realized that that clock mechanism is going to stick out in the back, and that would make it difficult to hang. So what I decided to do is I took some of the little mini Jenga blocks that you can get from the Dollar Tree, and I glued those to the top back, and that would be a way to, you could then balance those on a nail sticking out of the wall, and it would make it more easy to hang. Once the glue was dry, my clock was complete. There are some flaws on it here and there, like where some of the glue got on over the paint, but I don't mind that because that increases its kind of distressed farmhouse look.